Moving ahead, we have our second very interesting panel discussion themed as tackling the inevitable issues of latency, bandwidth, and security for AI, robotics with edge computing. It gives me immense pleasure to announce our eminent panelists. First up, we have Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al-Khalifa. He is the project director at Supreme Council of Health, Bahrain. And we have our second eminent panelist, Mr. Glen Thomas. He is a partner, head of technology and cyber consulting at Thornton. Third, we have our very eminent panelist, Dr. Emmanuel Goffi. He is co-director and co-founder at Global AI Ethics Institute, France. Lastly, we have our eminent panel moderator, Mr. Mohammed Viqar Uddin. He is the Vice President of Education at Bahrain IT Professionals Toastmasters Club. All the best to the panelists, and over to you, Mohammed, to start with the panel discussion.
Thank you for such a warm and wonderful introduction for all of us. Let me introduce myself. I am Mohammed Viqar, panel moderator for today's discussion, tackling inevitable issue of latency, bandwidth, and security for artificial intelligence, robotics with edge computing. Those who are new to artificial intelligence mean which think by itself, understanding the things will give desired result. Desired result expertise in artificial intelligence. I will give you a simple example to understand, like your mobile device or internet. When you search something, it will display the desired text, videos, and advertisement. It reaches to you. It is very simple, and slowly, artificial intelligence is rapidly expanding. What some experts call this is a century of artificial intelligence. Artificial means the first used by in 1950 by John McCarthy, father of artificial intelligence. To adopt artificial intelligence, we have lots of issues of latency, bandwidth, security. The next generation is the world is artificial intelligence. Let me tell you about Bahrain is very fast growing in the artificial intelligence center as per the experts advice and the top experts mention about that. For that, we have three honorable panelists. Number one, Dr. Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al-Khalifa, Project Director, Supreme Council for Health. And we have one more panelist, Dr. Emmanuel Goffi, Co-Director and Co-Founder, Global Artificial Intelligence Ethics Institute. We have one more panel, Mr. Glen Thomas, Partner, Head of Technology and the Cyber Consultancy, Glen Thornton. With that, I would like to make the question to Dr. Emmanuel Goffi. What might be ethical implication of artificial intelligence improvement, especially when it comes to making it work faster and dealing with bigger data sets? Over to you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the kind invitation. Obviously, you know that artificial intelligence at large is raising lots of ethical questions, and I guess we will go back to this idea of ethical questions later. But what we are seeing, what we are experiencing today is a growing number of IoTs and also faster and more efficient technologies that we are using in our everyday lives. And obviously, this raises lots of questions regarding the responsibility that we have in using those systems. when it comes to this edge computing, and you all know that it's all about bringing data and API closer to the end user, obviously the idea is that the end user will be responsible for what he will put into his IoTs in terms of data. And it will be also responsible about how we will secure all the systems, which is not the case right now because the cloud is secured, right? So what we are seeing is just the displacement of responsibility from cloud storage and big companies that are using those cloud storage toward the user, right? And so this is the first thing that we have to keep in mind, that are people ready to hold this kind of responsibility? Are they aware of the fact that they will be held responsible for what should happen in terms of, for example, if there is a breach in their privacy, there is a breach in their data and someone is using them, will they be really aware that it is upon their responsibility, it's on their shoulders? That's the big issue that we have. Then, because things will go faster, we also have the big issue with how people will process all the data that they will get, right? When you have really fast answers, you don't have time to take, some time to think about what should I do next. So you just, into the rhythm of the data and the processes and the application. And at some point we need, I guess that's something really important. We need to step back from all that and take some time and to think about, okay, what is my role into that? Must I just follow all the technical recommendation? Must just I follow the AI recommendation, or should I take some time by myself and think about it and try to make my own decisions? So this is something that we really have to work on, is to educate people, just to make them aware that they're obviously it will go faster and it will be easier to get information when you are working with edge computing. But at the same time, it means that you will be responsible for what happens to your data, and then you will be responsible for the decision that you will make. And if you go too fast, sometimes that's not good. Obviously, technology can help in many, many ways, and sometimes going faster is great. But I mean that most of the time, it's really important when you have to make heavy decision to take some time and not to run after data, not to run after applications, or not to run after recommendations made by artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. Such a nice insight shared with us. Now we have another eminent panelist, Dr. Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al-Khalifa. How is the edge computing enhancing healthcare, and what challenges are there? Over to you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think coming from the application side, the cloud computing has pushed the requirement for edge computing. So today, some applications really need to have that real-time processing, and especially in healthcare, we have a lot of examples that are very rich in the need to have processing closer to the edge, or to, let's say, where the data is being generated. And therefore, we've seen that edge computing has been talked about a lot in healthcare. I'll just give a few examples, because some people, when they think about edge computing, they really just think about the processing at probably the patient side. But in healthcare, we have other examples, such as ambulances that are requiring to have processing not really in the hospital, but in the peripheries of the network. And these ambulances can sometimes be disrupted. They can lose connectivity, and this is where the power of edge computing can be used. Similarly, we have surgeries, robotic surgeries now, and the need to have decisions on the spot, whether it is being done remotely or being done physically. So there are a lot of examples, there are a lot of situations where applications of health or edge computing are available in healthcare. But at the same time, these needs or these requirements that pushed us that came out from this change in technology have created different challenges. So these challenges also need to be really addressed before we go ahead and say, well, these solutions are really adaptable, or today we can adopt these technologies, or let's say adopt them. And just to talk about a few of these, we talked about latency as a main requirement. So I think really being able to adopt the edge computing in our infrastructure today, we really need to be able to understand what is our appetite for latency, and how we can mitigate that through using whether it is edge computing or cloud computing, because today we are introducing a new technology which is overwhelming our IT operation. Today we have different responsibilities, whether we have people responsible for cloud, and now we are talking about solutions that are on the edge. So this multi-tiered technology is really creating more demands, especially that we need to coexist all these different data storages that are coming up with different sizes, with different speeds, different requirements, and putting this in a complete operation that we are managing. So today we are talking about our NOCs. I think NOCs in the future also will be becoming even more critical by introducing edge computing. Over to you.
Thank you, Sheikh Khalid Khalifa. Such a nice way to explain about the healthcare. Now we have Mr. Glen. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Glen, what are some of the security challenges of edge computing? How to tackle by this artificial intelligence? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the forum and talk today. Firstly, let me apologize for potential noise that you can hear in the background. Unfortunately, I had to be a bit mobile this afternoon, and I'm out in the field work, so there's a little bit noise in the background. Look, every technology that we adopt has a lasting impact on how we interact, not only at work, but also at home and in our everyday lives. And it has a parallel learning curve for us, not only personally, but also in business and government. And the same is certainly true in cloud computing, which is really involved adapting to a simpler, more scalable and arguably reliable version of the client server infrastructure. But as a result of this, there has been a number of challenges that has been thrown up as we move into cloud and edge computing. When we're dealing with such things as various platforms such as traffic lights, any IoT, CCTV, GPS, and autonomous vehicles, which are becoming more and more prevalent. And as I mentioned, there are a number of key challenges that face edge computing. We're talking about power supply, physical location, bandwidth, and log jams and bottlenecks. But as you say, I have a particular focus on security concerns, and as do a significant number of my clients and certainly others that I talk to. And this is the result as a number of multiple devices that are managing data. With the advent of edge computing, the attack surface that adverse and nefarious actors are able to access to ply their trade, for want of a better word, in trying to attack an organization's network has grown exponentially. And some examples of this is, the injection of malware or unauthorized software or even hardware onto a network. We're all, I think, very familiar with digital twins, and we're seeing something very similar to this happening in the edge computing, where there are fake nodes are being deployed into the field, and they have the same identifier as legitimate nodes. So that's one methodology. Another is the physical security of the devices that are out there that are acting on the edge computing or at nodes. And as I mentioned, by its very nature, edge computing increases the attack surfaces available for these actors to look and to exploit any weaknesses. So being able to secure these edge computing nodes and sites, etc., it needs a lot more physical security and being able to ensure that they're not readily accessible. Then we also have what we call communication level attacks, where through this twinning or duplication of nodes, they are able to access information and then reroute that information to their own servers to be able to utilize that information for their own, I guess, purposes, be that for ransomware or selling the data. And finally, DDoS, being able to access a significant amount of devices and the power that brings with that increases their ability to be able to provide, or act in denial of DDoS attacks that they might have on networks as well.
Thank you, Mr. Glen, for such a way you have explained about how to deal the challenges in the cloud computing of artificial intelligence. So now, next, one more question to our panelist, Dr. Emmanuel Goffi. Are ethical concerns regarding artificial intelligence security culture depends?
Yes, actually, every time we talk about ethics, there is a strong cultural, element that we have to take into account. We all have to understand, and I think that when I say we, I mean mainly in the West, we have to understand that we don't hold any kind of truth regarding what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And every time we're talking about ethics, we have to take into account that in some countries, ethics does not exist. There is no such question as ethics regarding artificial intelligence. In some countries, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable might be very different from what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in the West. And in other countries, you even have ethics that is not a question because it's given by your culture, by your religion, for example. And you don't have to question yourself as an individual about what you have to do. You just have to read some rules that have been given to you, right? So this is kind of a bias that we have in the West when we talk about ethics applied to artificial intelligence, that we take for granted that we all have this kind of ethical questions, which is not true at all. And also you have to keep in mind that in some places, some countries, artificial intelligence, when it comes to using these systems, is not about what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. It's about what is beneficial for some countries, right? In some countries like France, because I'm French, right? It's easy to ask us of ethical questions because we don't have, big issues regarding, for example, our economic development. In other countries, AI is a strong source of economic development. So ethics will go really low in the priority list, or even it will be just out of the priority list, which is perfectly understandable, right? It's a luxury for us in the West to have this kind of questioning, while in some countries, AI and developing AI systems, edge computing and all these systems is just a matter of survival, right? So this is something that we really have to understand and to accept. It's the world does not work the way we want it to work. There is a reality out there, and this reality is made of diversity. And diversity will be found also in the ethical, when they exist, stances regarding artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. Now to the next panelist, Dr. Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al-Khalifa. What are the best practices have been deployed in AI and robotics projects in healthcare that ensure latency, bandwidth, and security challenges will address?
Thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, I think that number one will be data governance. I think understanding the life cycle of data when it is created, where it is used, really, takes such projects a long way. I'll just give an example about that. When we deploy edge computing solutions, or let's say any AI in general, I think that it is very important to see what data really needs to be communicated back. The reason is several things. I think sharing less data and processing it at the edge allows for addressing the security at that point, not at, I'm not sending all the data back. So this creates different requirements, but at least reduces that burden of all the data being sent back to the central storage, where some data doesn't need to go there. For example, we take a remote ICU, or we take a remote patient monitoring, maybe at home. So not all the information needs to go back. So this is, I think, the beauty of having those solutions that can actually take a real-time decision on the edge, use artificial intelligence at the edge. I think creates a new setup where we don't actually need to be infesting our networks. This for cloud computing, that is cost that is being accumulated, and this is one way that we can actually reduce cost. I mean, we know how important that is in projects and healthcare, reducing our cost. So I think that really these applications are going to be successful because they really have a lot of attractiveness and usability. So this is, I think, what I can see in terms of applicability of these solutions in healthcare.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid, for sharing nice information about the healthcare. Now, the next question will go to Dr. Emmanuel. AI uses machine learning for network traffic detection and risk identification. Machine language itself is an old technology. How effective is AI for cybersecurity compared to traditional non-AI security systems?
Is that question for me or for Dr. Glen?
Yeah, it's for you, yes.
Okay, can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, AI uses machine language for network traffic detection and risk identification. Machine language itself is an old technology. How effective is AI for cybersecurity compared to traditional non-AI security systems?
That's a really technical question, and I don't know if I can answer that right. I'm an ethicist, I'm a philosopher, so I'm not into the tech part. That's why I was asking if this question was really not me, but I can't really, I don't have the ability to answer this kind of question. I'm much more into the ethical and philosophical questions that are raised by artificial intelligence. So I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question.
Thank you, Doctor. Now I have to raise one more question to our panelist, Dr. Sheikh Khalid. Growing cloud computing and its application in healthcare, modern medical instruments at the edge are becoming AI-enabled, such as smart hospitals care, patient monitorings, and diagnosis systems. How the edge computing is transforming healthcare? Is there any regulatory body that monitor and authorize the AI-based security solutions that are being sold for commercial use?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question because, you know, when we deploy technology in healthcare, it is really, you know, affecting the health and the well-being of the people. So it is not a environment where you have an appetite for, let's say, for complications or for error. So these solutions that we talked about, I mean, normally they don't go into production very fast. So for example, if we look at Apple had the heart rate monitoring app a very long time back, but it was never, you know, it took a very long time for Apple to get the, you know, FDA approval. So, you know, they released several, you know, iPhone releases before they introduced those to the, you know, to the iPhone watch and to the mobile app. So, you know, this is something which is goes through a lot of approvals in terms of, you know, bodies that kind of look at the ethical use of medical devices, especially like for use in the United States. FDA looks at that, and you know, in Bahrain we don't really have, I'll say, a specific body that looks at, but you know, I don't think that, you know, hospitals in Bahrain use anything that is not approved by FDA or not has been, that can present enough evidence that you know, this testing has been done. And therefore I think, you know, we need to speed up the process of technology enablement, but at the same time we are sometimes pushed back because of the need to be able to have you know, enough testing for those products. So yes, I think it's a very, very valid question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Now we have 10 more minutes, so I need to get one more question for Dr. Goffi. As again, I am asking some technical questions. Maybe you can relevant to the non-technical way. What is the best direction for implementing the most suitable AI techniques in cybersecurity?
I would say that first and foremost, back to the previous question regarding the role of culture in the ethical assessment. I think that we first have to think about what security means for all of us. We do not share the same perspective on what is security, what are the risks, and what are the threats. So this is basically the first thing that we have to focus on. It's always the same thing. When you want to set a strategy, you need to define the final end of the strategy first. You need to know where you're going, and then you will set the road and you will see how you can go there. So when it comes to cybersecurity, first thing first would be to think about what do we mean exactly by security, and what are the threats, who are potentially our enemies, what are the risks that we have to assess or to mitigate, right? And that's the first thing that we really have to think about, because once again, when we look at the diversity of perspective regarding security, just look at international relations and you will understand that China does not have the same concerns regarding security as the United States, right? And we can make this kind of comparison with almost all countries all around the world, right? So this must really be based on a specific assessment of what is security, what is needed in order to ensure this kind of security.
Thank you, Dr. Goffi, for such a wonderful way you have explained about that one. Now, I would like to go back to Dr. Sheikh Khalid, and I will ask again one more technical question to him because he is an expert in the technical things. So now, how can AI exploit it to provide intelligent bandwidth allocation decision to enhance latency performance?
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, I think one of the fundamentals of, let's say, real-time applications of AI is to look at the latency issue and how to maintain a good performance and good bandwidth. And I think that therefore, the applications that have been developed for use at real-time AI processing really have requirements that provide embedded solutions for managing those bandwidth. So I don't think that with what we are with the available bandwidths, it is really about making sure that those solutions continue to be connected and continue to have the processing allowed. And therefore, we can see that several companies have produced solutions that kind of support this kind of infrastructure that we are looking for in order to build our applications and solutions. I mainly focus on applications. And what applications need out of the infrastructure. So it's really how to be able to, as we accustomed to cloud computing, now we are looking at how to manage our applications on the edge. So I think this is the beauty of having a multi-tiered infrastructure, because now we are able to address issues such as latency, bandwidth, even at the application level. So I think going forward, I think that these issues, although they are challenges, but they are not something that technology cannot solve.
Thank you, doctor. And both are doctors, so I am saying all the doctors. So now there is one more question. It came to my mind to ask Dr. Goffi. And what do you think, how this artificial intelligence adopted by human in upcoming years? Because we are saying this century for artificial intelligence, or AI, how it can be transferred, human adopted. Over to you.
Do you mean how it will transform us as human? Is that what you mean? Oh, I mean, artificial intelligence is already transforming us. We are all kind of exo-cyborg, right? When we're using our cars, when we're using our cell phone, we are really highly dependent on these kind of items right now, right? But that's a really interesting question from a philosophical stance. There is such a question as, what does that mean to be human when you look at artificial intelligence? And what is the limit where someone, let's say, that will be using prosthetics will become something that is artificial, will become a robot, something else than human, right? You've all heard about transhumanism and this idea that we can mix up machines and human beings. And so that raises the question for all of us, I mean, in philosophy, of what it is to be a human, where our humanness is exactly. Is it in our brain? Is it in our soul? Is it in our heart? Is it kind of a mix of all that with our body, etc. Right? So this is transforming in the sense that we are now entering into the intricacy of the human brain and the way the brain is functioning. So we are asking ourselves questions about ourselves while we're trying, to mimic or to duplicate our brain. And that's where I think AI is really interesting. But at the same time, my concern is that we are not really asking those questions. We are just moving forward with the use of AI without asking this kind of questions that are really important for the future. The point is not to say that we have to fear AI or we have to really embrace it. It's about, okay, do we really want to go there? Do we really want to be brought to something that is really, unknown to us? And what will be the next step? So I think that at some point, we as human beings need to have this kind of questioning. And this is where I think AI is transforming us in kind of, let me use kind of a rude word here. AI is transforming us in kind of slaves. Once again, because, latency is things are going faster. Obviously, we do not have enough time to think about what we're doing. We do not have enough time to make decisions by ourselves. So we're just following the machines. And that's my concern, that we are losing our humanness because we're being enslaved by this technology. This is something, if you like philosophy, that you will find in lots of discussion by Heidegger, for example, and other philosophers like Simondo. A really interesting point about technology.
Thank you, Doctor, for such a wonderful way you have explained about how it is transforming ourselves. We are already adopting the AI in ourselves, in our life. Thank you for that. There is a question came from the audience. What are the best practices for hybrid cloud deployment? So the hybrid cloud deployment is mean like you are offering a data center as well as you have a cloud. So both can be integration and both are functioning. So one you are keeping for your on-prem, which is for the critical operations, and one we are keeping for the cloud, especially for the public, and you want more audience to be get connected. Latency will be not an issue, and availability and the performance will be there. So what do you think, Dr. Khalid, about my thought? I think we lost the connection with Dr.
Yes,
Khalid.
we lost Dr. Khalid.
Yes. Okay, I think how many minutes I have? I think we are having any questions?
Maybe a minute more, or rather we are on dot 4:15. So yeah, this concludes the panel. Maybe last thoughts, Dr. Goffi and Mr. Mohammed.
Okay, thank you. So now, Dr. Goffi, one more question for you. And how we can make ourselves the best cybersecurity, and how we can make scale and responsible data collection for AI in network systems.
Once again, I think it's when it comes to security, it's all about education and just making sure that people are aware of the fact that security is really contextual, right? And it's the big issue that we all have is that we're working and we are actually evolving in a globalized world when we think that everything is the same everywhere, right? But when it comes to cybersecurity, I think that we don't have all the same concerns regarding cybersecurity. Just keep in mind that in some places, cybersecurity is not a problem at all, just because there is no such thing as artificial intelligence. There is no such things as the technology that we're using here, right? It's not something that is universal. So if we really want to be good at cybersecurity, I think we have to focus on our own problems, our own concerns. We really have to think deep into those security issues. We have to identify clearly and thoroughly what are the risks and what are the threats. And then maybe we'll see if we can cooperate with other countries, with other communities or other cultures. But I think that cybersecurity, like any kind of security, must be something that is really local, that must be thought locally. So it means that you need a strong education for the people that will address this kind of situation in a specific country.
Thank you, Dr. Goffi and Dr. Sheikh Khalid and Mr. Glen, for your wonderful way of explanation about how the artificial intelligence in terms of our AI. So I really thanks to each and every one who are part of this one. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our heartily thanks to our panelists, Dr. Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al-Khalifa, Dr. Emmanuel Goffi, and Mr. Glen Thomas. Bahrain Hybrid Cloud and Data Center Summit for the perfect logistic support and guidance and extended to all of us. And we are well connected all over the world. Thank you. And over to you, Mr. Host.
Thank you.
Sorry, Miss Host.
Thank you, eminent panelists, Mohammed, Khalid, Glen, and Emmanuel, for the extremely brainstorming discussion on edge computing with AI, AI ethics, and robotics. The key takeaways shared by you all for our delegates will surely be beneficial in their day-to-day enterprise level jobs. I thank each one of you for your time, your efforts, and your knowledge sharing on the platform today. Have a nice day ahead, all of you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Take care.
Thank you. And
Thank
just
you.
to add, Dr. Khalid just joined in. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for your presence in the panel discussion.